Okay, think we are. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Hey, this is Keith with How to Build Our Own Home. We are live. This is every Thursday night, evening, Mountain Standard Time, 5 p.m. We go live. And this is an opportunity for just me as a general contractor to reach out to any of those owner builders or I even have some people looking to be general contractors or subcontractors in various trades. And I just open myself up and take questions. I've helped a lot of people get started in business. I've been a general contractor for upwards of 20 years. So I just have this opportunity to just meet a lot of people and talk to people about their owner builder projects. And any questions you have, we'll be fielding those questions. So please have your questions ready and we'll get started. I want to talk about a big issue here. It's a big issue that has been on my mind for quite some time. And it has to do with the concept of building too big. And I see a lot of owners. In fact, I've seen owner builders build far bigger homes than they really should be building, more so than I've seen a lot of general contractors build. And now I live in the Mountain West, and they build a lot of big homes here. I would say we build bigger homes than probably you'd shake a stick at in most parts of the world. And I've seen that to be a case. And you see it with the barn dominiums called the barn-do homes. People want this big, huge open space. They want a big home. Now, in traditional building, that can be an issue, and it comes when you take too long to build a home. Now, I live in a 1,700 square foot addition, and then I have about a 1,700 square foot front of my home that I originally remodeled. And as you know from a lot of talking, I love to scale. I love to cash flow. I love to build up to what I can eventually call, what you would call a larger home. But even still, I've seen 6, 7, 8,000 square foot homes, which is more than double what I have. And these homes can be very, very difficult to resell. They're very difficult to manage as owner builders. And they're also more challenging with regard to the breakup and all the costs and budgeting and you name it. That's why I strongly recommend owner builders scale down as much as you possibly can, especially with the market the way things are. Pull back. You don't need to have that size of a home. And I think there's a reason why we tend to build too big, and it's because we say something that really isn't what we should be saying. We say to ourselves, this is our forever home. And the minute you say that this is our forever home, a couple things come into that whole basket. The first thing is that you have pressure to fit all future needs. The minute you say that this is our forever home, it now puts pressure on you to fit all future needs. And that obviously increases the size of the home. You don't need to do that. Stop calling it your forever home. I'm going to give you some reasons why and what you should really be calling it. But the minute you call it the forever home, you explode the size, you explode the cost, you explode the budget. All right. I don't know where this term came from. I'd like to do some research with my wife maybe and find out where this term came from. But it's not helpful. It doesn't really help you understand the situation. The other thing is that you can't really see the future. You can't see every need that's going to surface. And plus, with a lot of jobs and careers, I've changed careers a half a dozen times in my lifetime. Various trades, of course, I've been in and out of, but I was in higher education administration. I was in secondary education. I've been in the nonprofit sector and affordable housing. I've jumped around. I've been through a lot of different things in my life. And if I thought that I was going to build my forever home 15, 20 years ago, I would have been off my rocker. I didn't see the things that were coming. So again, that concept forever home doesn't see everything in the future. And then it tends to be too big. The minute you call something your forever home, the first build or even the first phase or just the home itself can tend to be a little too big. And you don't have to be that way up front. Here's some other things to think about. Is this your next home, or is this your retirement home? Is this your family home? Is this a rental home, or could it eventually be a rental home? If it is, it's not your forever home. Now, I'm in a home, but the part up front is an old part of the home. My wife and I actually rented that out for quite some time. My parents live in that part of the home now, so it's changed. That was not our forever home. Now, back in the day, we could have called it that, but we now live in the back. Now we are thinking this may not be our forever home. We don't know where we will go. This is a lot to manage. We may end up being in the mountains. I don't know. Is it a family trust home? Meaning, do you want to keep it in a trust, or will it be sold and then that money be used to purchase something else or build something else? And if that something else is still part of the trust, is it a family trust? Do you want to keep it in the family, either the equity of the home or the actual home itself? And then, is this your downsized home? Is this, oh, we're now in our downsized home. Just keep in mind that a home is typically a transition. If you were a nomadic tribe, you'd be in a tent and you would pop your tent, live in the tent, break it down and move it to a different location. So home is very, very different for a lot of people. The minute you call something a forever home, it has some challenges with it, but it wraps too many things into the whole concept of a forever home. And as a result, you can tend to design that initial build inappropriately for your immediate needs. Think in terms of immediate needs, but you can think long-term, but that long-term doesn't have to be the full build right now. If you can think in terms of stages on what your actual home is, like, is this your bug out home? You know, I know a lot of people are thinking in those terms. Well, we know what bug out means. It's a shed. It could be a shanty. It could be a cabin, something that's used, something that's small, that has a lot of ground to it. And maybe there might be some deer running through where you have some access to some protein. So I want you to think about what you're calling your home, because it really helps you dial in on the specifics of what you are actually building. And please stay away from that term forever home. It does have a lot of baggage. And I have seen some families build some monstrosities, real monstrosities they don't need to build. And as a result, they don't really budget properly because they try to save up front in the budget. And then the eventual product of that is never built the way they imagined. I just heard a story, and I've heard this a couple of times, but I just heard of a story of a family in Arizona that has been building a home for 15 years. It's roughly 6,200 square feet. And when they started building the home, they actually purchased all the tile for it, but they didn't install the tile. And my tongue twisting. They didn't install the tile until several years later, when that tile is now out of style. And so here's some of the problems with thinking, I'm going to build my forever home and it's going to be a gorgeous home. And it could take you 3 years. When that happens, you start running into some problems. The cost is far more than you could ever imagine. Design is not really up to speed, up to date. And as a result, you're never in the home. I met a gentleman, he was a farmer, about a year and a half ago, went up and took a look at him. He wanted me to look at a foundation. He built a permanent wood foundation, which means no concrete at all. The house started to settle. Well, the home was a monstrous home, and it was not even half done when I walked in. I don't know how the county permitting office allowed for that to happen, but he was running into financial difficulty, and he wanted to be able to sell the home to get into a home that now fits his needs, because he thought he was in a forever home. He's not. He now needs to downsize because of medical and health issues. But now there's so many things wrong with the home because he built it too big, cut corners, try not to do a wood foundation. Now the whole entire home is sinking. And all because he was thinking he was going to be there forever. Stop thinking that. Stop thinking you'll be there forever. Just think that you want to build a forever home. This is not your forever home, but you want to build a home that's going to last forever. That's a better way to think, because now you're thinking in terms of quality, you're thinking of scheduling, you're thinking of cost, you're thinking of the smart things when it comes to building a home. So that's my little rant for the day. I wanted to get that off my chest to help people give some perspective, and maybe we can change how things are done out there and be a little smart in how we go about stuff. Let's take some questions real quick as we continue. We got some interesting stuff here from Row USA, permitting approved. Nice weather build in Arizona. Woot, woot. Yep, Arizona is one of the best states to build this time of year, all the way through February, March. If you're in Arizona, it's a great place to build. The summer is kind of brutal. You don't want to pour concrete in the middle of July. It's hot. So if you're pouring concrete now or getting ready to pour concrete, it's going to cure just nicely with those cool temperatures. So I'm excited for you. Question from Sloan Click, hitting another mental roadblock. What items should I rope into loan? In other words, how much cash should I keep in hand for other life emergencies and house build? I had this brought up. I brought this up with another client, and they wanted to know, they had most of the money in cash, but they needed a loan to kind of finish off the house. I think it was about $120,000. So I'm not a financial advisor, but my gut feeling was, and I told him this, I says, try to keep at least 50,000 on hand for whatever needs you may need and get the rest in the loan. That way, you know, you have liquid cash. And right now in the market today, and I follow Travis, the economic ninja, and a lot of other people, they're telling you to keep your powder dry, keep some cash on hand. You may see opportunities. You may see a business to buy. You never know. And so having that liquid cash allows for emergencies, medical or otherwise, without having to go through the process of lending. All right. But here's something else I'd recommend. During the construction of your home, your credit is going to be hit. You're going to open up accounts at supply houses, and one supply house here, one supply house there, and that's going to affect your credit. Be very cautious about that. Make sure you don't do it a whole bunch, and make sure you get things paid off really, really fast. You want to maintain that credit as high as you possibly can, because it's not good just to have powder dry during the economy. Like down the street from me, there's a fourplex, 2 of them. All right. Had I been smart, I could have acquired those for pennies on the dollar during a down economy, and I would have rehabbed them far better than what they've done now, and I would have been proud of what I've done. That's the kind of person I am. I want to improve my community, but I wasn't prepared for what's coming. I didn't have powder in the keg ready to explode. My credit wasn't that great. Now I'm in a better situation. So make sure you're always in a good situation during times like these. And we're entering into an inflationary period, not a deflationary period, which means that it's going to be a mixture. Some assets are going to collapse in price. Other commodities are going to increase in price. Energy is going to increase, which means it's going to increase a lot of other products you buy to build a home. But some assets are going to depreciate in price. I can't tell you what and where and how, but we're more closer to the 1979 economic issue we ran into than the 2008 issue that we ran into. In 2008, we had more abundance. In 1979, we had more scarcity. We're moving into a more scarcity situation. Just research, do some history, read up on that. You'll be better informed if you do take some time to know the difference between 1979 and 2008 and those crashes. And that will really help you line yourself out for what's coming. But again, keep some powder dry and keep your credit in the best shape you can during the course of your build. Let's go with Alex. Ask the question. I'm planning on building my first home, less than 2,500 square feet. Great square footage. If my life changes, I would be okay moving. Well, that's a great attitude to have, because you are building a home as an owner builder to grab equity. You're eliminating the general contractor, which right away is 2,500 square feet. If I could run some numbers here, 2,500 times, let's say it's $200 a square foot. That's 500,000 roughly. It could be around 450 to maybe 500,000. Right away, that's 50 grand right off a general contractor fee on the low end of the scale if a contractor was charging 10%. So right away, you're now capitalizing on that equity. You now have equity in the home. That's powder. That's powder dry. Having equity in the home allows you for other things down the road. And you don't want to get into a home where you're upside down. You don't want to get into a home where you're overbuilding for your community. I just did a budget for a really neat family. I'm remodeling their home, and the budget was a little high, and we did some back and forth. And he didn't want to overbuild for the community. He's spot on, great technical analysis. He was very smart with his money, and so he shaved back quite a bit, almost $100,000 on the total cost of the home on the remodel. And so we're trying to maintain that equity par value for that market. And you always know your market. That's what we go through in the First Steps course. It really helps you know what the real cost and valuation is in your market, and make sure you get a really smart and even a good looking realtor like I've got that tells you what's going on in the market, what your CMA is and all that. You really need to be smart. Like for a business, you wouldn't go in there and say, I'm going to have a burger joint and my burger is going to be $18.50 and we're going to call it gourmet burgers. Well, even the price point is still too high. You can call it your forever burger or your forever home or your gourmet burger, but it's still going to be outpriced for the market. And if you need to liquidate that, you're not going to be able to do that. And you're going to lose a lot of value that you've put into the home. Now, remember this is very important. Sometimes people build their forever home, but they overbuild. That's another caveat with calling it your forever home. You put too much cost in it. You go upgrades on everything. You put all these costs in it, and it doesn't show in the appraisal. That's the real square footage shows in an appraisal, but a lot of the upgrades you do typically don't. So watch out for that. Know where your market, what your market supports. For example, if you're building a 2,800 square foot home and the average home square footage in the area could be 32 to 2,000 square feet, and it's in that range, and the homes are typically selling between 450 and 620, you don't want to build a home that costs you 820,000, because you're going to lose your shorts on that home if life changes and if you have to move. You're going to lose a lot of equity. Even in a booming economy, you could typically lose a lot. So be smart. And it's all because we think we're going to build a forever home and we're not. Let's go to the next question here. From Sloan. Hello, Sloan. Minimum for wood not clear, gravel drive, a house pad will be $20K. I'd like to know what the over excavation is on that. A well drilled is $15,000. How many cores are they going to give you on that well? How many attempts are they going to allow for that? I worry that an appraiser may not give all that value back when taking out the loan. Now here's the trick when it comes to appraisers. Okay. You need to actually be very specific on the value going into the home. A good appraiser is going to ask, what's your budget for the home? What's your cost for the home? Now, when I work with clients, I give them what's called a specification sheet for appraisal. And they also give that to the bank, and it details the total square footage, bathrooms, bedrooms, features, all this. And I also give them the budget. I'm not shy about that. And I make sure I'm covered with contingency, and I make sure I'm covered with everything I need in there. And lo and behold, like I did a budget for a client, and the appraiser gave us the exact amount on the budget. But if they don't know that information, they don't know the features and the square footage and the actual cost of the home, and then they come in and appraise it willy-nilly, they're going to go off CMA, comparable market analysis, of what homes are valuing in your area, and they're going to give you a lower appraisal value. And you don't want to go off of the appraised value of a CMA in your area, because those are homes that were built maybe 6 months ago, or they're existing homes that have been there for quite some time. New construction is a different beast, and that appraiser needs to see your budget. They need to see your specifications of all the features you're going to do to the home. And you do that, and you're going to make their job a little easier, because they know that new construction is different. It's new. It appraises different than existing. So don't get in the trap of letting them appraise your build on existing homes without a budget. Give that to them. And you can give that to the bank, and you can tell the bank, please give this to the appraiser. Okay. And if you force that, it's going to be much better off. All right. I could tell you stories and stories after that. Maybe later on I'll share a story of what happened with 12 homes that were not going to be built unless I pushed the appraiser, and I did that, and we saved a major housing subdivision for affordable housing. Question from Nate. Now, what would you think about radon? Should I do passive or active system first? It depends on the area. I know Colorado has a big issue with that. So does Idaho and some places in Montana. Mountainous areas typically have more of that as a problem because they have so much minerals that gas is coming through. Passive is not a bad problem. You're typically going to be okay with passive. The problem is that if you have a mechanical system, an electric system, it's kind of suck that radon gas from below the foundation and pull it out. If that is off or power goes off and it's a high issue with radon, and then that fan structure is an impediment to the natural flow of the radon, then you can have a problem. So I'm not a fan of mechanical unless local county permitting offices ask for it. Talk with your HVAC contractor, ask them what they recommend. But I've typically done just a simple perforated pipe buried in the gravel of the foundation before we pour the slab foundation. But I make sure I have that buried in about 6 inches of gravel. And then that gravel is compacted. It could city spec road base, but something with a little bit of air pockets in there. So all the air can find that tube, that perforated tube. And then that tube is run up through the frame structure all the way up. And the best axis is your chimney. So if you have a chimney, you run that radon gas all the way up through the chimney, and it comes out through the top of the home, out through the chimney, which is typically 2 feet away from the pitch of the roof. That's your best avenue for that. And so think about that. And if you don't have a chimney, might want to think about putting a nice chase in so there's no obstructions, a straight line of sight all the way up through the chimney. You don't want that coming up and back into the window somewhere. You want it going all the way up through the chimney. So next question, Wally. I'm interested in your current view on evolving 3D printed building elements and their potential to benefit self-builders. I've watched that. I have a couple of problems with that, especially the ones that pump out concrete and it looks like pudding coming out. I've seen those and I'm asking myself, where's the reinforcement? Where's the rebar? Where's the shear strength? Where's the hurricane straps? Where's the structural engineering to secure that whole building against inclement weather, high winds? What's the seismic capacity of that? So I haven't seen 3D printing on a large scale for construction come even close to what needs to happen. Now you can do a 3D for a plastic toy. If this was a plastic toy, it's not, but if this was a plastic toy, you could easily do a 3D print of that. Medical supplies are done in 3D, but for a home, I just don't even see it. I don't see it happening for quite some time because you have too many parts and components. You have an insulation component, you have the structural component, you have the hold downs and the fasteners and the J-bolts and the straps, and those are all metal components. You've got the nailing component. That's if they use traditional wood. It has a long ways to go because there's a lot of, I would be more interested in modular building. Like I just saw a home in China that was built in one day. It was a complete modular structure, but each component was fastened, secured, engineered and secured to all the other parts when they built it. So it's all there and it's ready for, being a secure building for quite some time. So I'm holding out on 3D homes. Excuse me. Bradley, question. Great. Welcome, Bradley. Hi, Keith. What are your thoughts on superior wall foundation walls? I did some research on that. I have to look into that to find out about that. Let me have to check. I think I remember doing a custom. Yeah, I know what that is. That's precast. It's the same. I have the same problem. The number one thing that makes for a really, really solid home that increases its value and increases its equity over time, maintains its equity, is a permanent foundation. Okay, remember I talked about earlier the gentleman up north? He built a permanent wood foundation, which means there's no concrete or rebar in the home, and it didn't have proper compaction. It didn't have the stabilization it needed, and as a result, it's settling in one part of the house. So having rebar and concrete, nothing surpasses those two components. When those components are brought together, you have a really solid foundation. In fact, that's the best foundation to put a home. Now you can use cinder block and then rebar inside the cinder block. And that I've seen that with a stem wall. I've even done a home recently where I did that. But I'm not a fan of superior wall foundation unless I know that there's rebar in it. Now, the ICF insulated concrete forms, they have rebar in those. Even though this rigid foam on the outside, they've got the plastic hold downs inside, and you just lay your rebar inside there. Then you pour your concrete, and that building's not going anywhere. I just have issues with the foam on the outside, and a lot of that technology is coming a long way where you can actually screw sheeting to the outside. But then I say to myself, why not just go with traditional wood framing? By that time, are you really saving any money? That's why I like OmniBlock, because all you do is mud the inside, and then you do a gray coat and a finish coat on the outside. No lath on that wall, and it's a highly efficient wall. But I haven't. I could debate back and forth between ICF and precast, but I love OmniBlock better than those right now. It just requires a structural mason. So let me take another question here. My wife just went to the door there. So, hey, Mally, are you there? Let's see, Bradley. There we are. I'll go to this one. Zach Cutsforth. That's Cutsforth. That's a cool name. My idea is to dig a 3 foot to 4 foot perimeter around the entire basement and pour a retaining wall, and there would be a permanent 3 foot air gap around the basement walls. Okay, let me read that again. 3 foot perimeter around the entire basement and pour a retaining wall, and there would be a permanent 3 foot air gap. Oh, yeah, it's a 3 foot air gap. That would be your crawl space, not air gap. But air gap is fine. 3 foot air gap around the basement walls. Yeah, you'll want to make sure that you insulate that perimeter wall, and that's probably your frost depth. Find out what your frost depth is. If you've got a 32-inch frost depth, then the dirt has to come the outside of that wall and back up against it, and that becomes your frost depth. And then you're going to have a little bit of that wall exposed on the outside. It could be 6 inches, 12 inches, you never know. That's the part that you're going to have a cold transfer from the outside to the inside of that stem wall. So that means you'll want to insulate that stem wall on the perimeter. And there's all kinds of ways to do that, especially the rim board on the fascia. There's going to be some wood exposed. And rigid board is pretty good with that. I've seen a lot of people take 1 to 2 to 3 inches of ridge board. They cut it out, and between the floor joists, they stick it up in there, and they squirt, a foam in there. They seal it up, and that's a good rigid. I just don't like bats, because how many times have you gone into older homes and they see this batted insulation? It starts to hang and it's loose, and it's not doing its job anymore. So that's why rigid foam is great, just cutting it in pieces and putting it on there. There's even a new insulation that's kind of wrapped in plastic, and so it can't get mold, it can't get water into it, and it just goes up against there, and they seal up the whole side of the inside of that stem wall. So it's just insulating that stem wall as you're going to run into. Okay, next question.
Did you read all 3 of his?
Let me read the next one.
He's in the Northwest.
Yeah. Just show me the next one. I live in the Northwest Washington with a high water table, and I'm thinking this would make it impossible for the basement wall to get damp or flood. It would, but you're gonna want to ventilate that stem wall. If you have high water table, the moisture that's going to rise up, even if the water table is 6 inches down or even a foot down, is still going to want to creep up through that soil structure, and it's going to infiltrate that whole cavity. So you're going to want to ventilate that whole stem wall, and that's going to be part of your code requirement. I'm willing to bet you. We can do all excavation ourselves and potentially forming for concrete as well. Just be careful on that footing, because you mentioned a 3 to 4 foot footing with a stem wall on top of that. You don't need to go that wide. Check your engineer and get a skinny bucket and maybe 18 inches wide on that footing. You don't need to go that wide on that. That'd be a lot of cost on that concrete. I've had many clients call me. It's been a number one high cost on footings. We hired an excavator and he came and dug the footings, but he dug the footings with a 2-foot bucket, which meant a 24-inch wide footing. And then if you have a lot of aggregate and rock and boulders in that ground, then the sloughing, it comes off. Or if you have sand, then what happens is that footing turns into something wide like that, and you've almost got double the concrete. That's because they were digging with the wrong bucket size. That's why I really like to stay within an 18 or a 12-inch bucket. And I'm very ginger on what I take out. I don't need excessive concrete. I've seen a lot of concrete wasted that way. Next question here. Sloan, I agree with your intro talk. Rates have forced wife and I to dial it back to a small first phase to just get out on the new land. 1,000 square feet, 1 bed, 1 bath, great room, and mud room. Plan to add on. Great. That's a scalable situation. What are the best spaces or rooms to tie into a next phase? That would be the end of a hallway or a possible mud room or a breezeway going out to a garage. So if you have a breezeway that's connecting to a garage, you could like, for example, I'm building a home for a client and we have the 2 plans. Okay. We have the initial build for the first part of the home. And then there's a pad for a garage with a loft apartment above the garage. But the transition between the 2 buildings is an actual covered porch, which could eventually, and I'll actually put a footing around this entire porch, and it will be part of the total footing of the house plan. So that if we need to, we can go straight out over that porch, encase it, connect it to the garage. And so you wouldn't have to expose yourself to any inclement weather to go from one building to the other building. So those are some of the best ways to connect those and scale those up. But I like a rear porch or side porch that you can easily connect to an existing building down the road. You don't want a full-on connection because that can be costly. You want a partial connection, and the breezeway connection is one of the best ways to do that. Okay.
This is a good one.
Alex R., what are the best updates, features for house build for a good ROI on a build to make equity? What are the cost best updates? I'm going to let my wife answer that question.
No, I don't.
You're the realtor, girl.
I was just thinking on building attic trusses.
As far as this for a house build for a good ROI, one of the things I like to do is make sure that it's got an open space. All right. If the more open space, it's a real popular feel. It doesn't go back. It knows it's a new home. People walk into it, and if you do it right, it's going to be it's going to be a great feel for a lot of people. And then, of course, a kitchen, and make sure you do a nice kitchen, open space. You have to build a home to sell it to the wife. I was a realtor for a while, and every time I took clients to go see a home, the husband would go right to the garage and peek in the garage and take a look. That's about all he'd look at. And then the wife would look at the kitchen, look at the bathrooms, look at the master bathroom, look at all that kind of stuff. And so you're actually building a home to sell to a woman, probably 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 90% of the time you're trying to sell a woman. So keep that in your mind. I know if you're a male trying to build a home, you want to talk to a wife and the women to see what sells and what they want to sell. And you'll be heads and toes above everyone else trying to build a home.
That's a good question, though.
That's a question from Sloan. Thank you for info about the appraiser. Is there anything that you do not spend money on that the appraiser will likely not give value for? Yes, they tend to not assess the square footage of the kitchen. Kind of stinks. If you look at the square footage of a kitchen, it's far more than the square footage of a living room, right? And so the more square footage you put into the kitchen, they don't really factor that. They think they lump it all in as the same square footage. And I'd love to get appraisers across the country to start thinking in terms of the cost per square foot to build a kitchen versus the cost per square foot to build a living room. It's not the same. They should literally come in and measure the kitchens. So if you're building a large kitchen, which a lot of people like, it's the family environment. Like my wife was in the kitchen yesterday with a close friend of hers cooking, baking yesterday, getting ready for a wedding. And they had all the room they needed. It was an enjoyable experience. And the kitchen is one of the places where there's a lot of joy. Again, you're building a house for a wife, for a woman. That's who you're selling it to. And so, if you could emphasize to that appraiser that we're building a kitchen, and you could call it, what do you call it, a gourmet kitchen, or you call it a gourmet kitchen, or with a butler's thing,
Butler pantry.
a butler pantry. These are key words to let them know that this is a higher end. There's a lot of value to it. It's going to be easier to sell. People want it. People are looking for it. I built a home for a client, and we just did a simple pantry. And during the course of construction, found some better ideas for a pantry. And she says, let's just finish it off here. We'll come back and do it later. We came back and made it a butler's pantry. Actually, I had a subcontractor do that for her. I didn't manage that at all. And it was just great. Now it's a higher value because she calls it a butler's pantry. So these are things you can look into. Square footage upstairs, attic trusses is my favorite as a man because I love to get the most square footage for the easiest build. And so you can have bonus rooms. And if you're smart, you can actually do, this goes back to a story I wanted to bring up. I saved a nonprofit housing project, because families weren't buying because they wanted more space, but they couldn't afford the more space. And back in the day when concrete was super cheap, they would just dig a foundation, put a basement in there, and then call it an unfinished basement. And people loved that because it gave them the forever concept. It gave them the opportunity that they could grow into that and have their family live in the basement. So given the concrete was so pricey, we actually put upstairs unfinished attic space upstairs, got the cities to approve it. And we saved like 20 to 30,000 on not finishing the upstairs, but they eventually had the opportunity down the road to finish it if they wanted to. City just asked for a couple of caveats, a separate breaker box for power, making sure that there's a GFI up there, and making sure that there's plumbing, that it's capped and insulated. And they had a couple of things they wanted to make sure we did to make sure everything, and it was engineered for a second floor, and it had windows with a proper egress, a couple of things like that. And then they gave us the okay, and it had to have a door, and it had to have a floor, but no carpet, flooring, paint, drywall, none of that had to be done. And no finished plumbing, just caps. So that was a great ROI, and we sold every single one of those homes because people now saw the value. And for women, the value is one thing. For men, the value is an entirely different thing. And space and room to grow is kind of what a man would think. And kitchen and bathrooms and bedrooms, it's kind of what a woman would think. That's just a general caveat. So Sloan, click. Also, to add to the above 1,000 square feet, first phase, we plan to do vaulted ceilings and an open loft cabin cottage feel. Do you have any thoughts on the open lofts? We have 4 kids under 6 years old to use. Keep that loft, the open space, as shallow as you can. Try not to make it too high up. For example, don't make it an A-frame situation where you've got 20 feet of open space, and then you've got, 8 feet below where you've got your living space. That's going to be very uncomfortable to heat, and it's not going to be very efficient to heat or cool. So keep your loft, your open space, meaning your vaulted ceilings. I don't like to go over 12 feet on typical, personal family custom homes, unless I'm building a very high end. I built high end homes where we had almost 30 feet of massive open space. There's a cost involved for that, and you want to try to avoid that. And then for loft areas, just keep in mind, if you're going to have a loft, I think it was first phase, open loft for the cabin, just keep in mind, lofts can tend to be hot. I was just talking with a client yesterday on this. We are remodeling a home for him, and he has an office right here, and then there's a loft up above that for bunk beds and stuff like that. And he wanted to seal that off. And I said, well, we have a heat problem up here. There's no proper ventilation up here. And so I came up with some ideas for him. He has some skylights up in there. So we may just do some wax seal skylights that open up automatically under a certain heat or electrically open up so we can ventilate that loft. We have a kind of a bonus room loft in the old part of the house. And in the summer, it can get hot. And that's because of insulation. I've only got about that much space between the ceiling below and the roof above. And that can tend to get warm, and those lofts can get hot. So if you don't ventilate it properly, if you don't have good air systems in there, that can be hot. Question, George Loco. Is that Loco? That's a cool name. Can you explain hold downs as it pertains to openings? Hold downs. What kind of opening? Is it a garage opening, a door opening, a back door opening? Hold down could be a Titan screw. It could be a J bolt. It could actually be a full-on strap that's put into the concrete at the time of pour. It could be just about anything, whatever the engineer requires. Now, typically, when you pour concrete, it could be a slab, could be a stem wall, could be just about anything. The engineer is going to call out some hold downs for that house. And these are typically the ones that get installed at the time of the pour. You'll see them typically in garage doors, where the garage door could be an 18-foot garage door, and there'll be straps. And they'll come down at an angle, and they'll get put into the footing, actually the slab of the home. And then they'll come up into the concrete foundation. And then they continue on up as straps against the wood structure. And that's where you'll have 2, maybe 3 or 4 different studs, king studs, right in front of those. And then they get nailed to that. And that's called a strap. And that's an opening. So that's a hold down in an opening, in a garage opening. And you may have them in other parts of the house, like your doors, but you want to keep them away from the edge of the doors. Otherwise, you're going to run into some problems. You'll also have them at the corners of the homes, typically straps on the corners of the homes. And if you forget one of those straps, then they have what's called a makeshift one, where you drill into the foundation where the strap is supposed to go, and then you epoxy it in with either a carriage bolt or something like a Titan. But in some jurisdictions, they require third-party assessment or third-party testing or verification that you drilled the appropriate depth and you had the right length of screw or Titan or whatever to go down into that depth, and you had epoxy properly filled in that hole so that it's going to be a proper hold down. In some jurisdictions, in my jurisdiction, I have to have a third-party engineer to actually observe that. I did that on a home over here just to the south of me about 2 years ago, and we had some really insane smart walls, smart systems, which are prefab metal wall structures because they needed to be stronger than wood. And we had these insane epoxied, almost like big fat carriage bolts, like that fat, go all the way down. And luckily I had the footings were deep enough for it. We actually went a little deeper because I was worried about settling on the home. So I did about a 6-inch deeper footing on that. And that whole epoxy bolt went right through that whole metal structure and held down that entire wall. So those are hold downs pertaining to openings. So sorry if I over explain, but at least I cover as much ground as you can stand. How do you waterproof walls on the outside? I don't go all the way up. And that's a really good question. And I wish more and more people would do this. This is why people go to SIP systems, structurally insulated, or not SIP systems, but ZIP systems, because the whole wall system is pretty much waterproof. I only waterproof and the transition between the concrete, which is a stem wall or basement wall or even a slab on grade. I waterproof the transition between the concrete and the wood substrate, which could be your frame structure. And I typically go between 3 and 6 inches above and 3 and 6 inches below. And I seal that whole part. Now, there's a lot of products up there that you can do. There's a peel and stick product. I like liquid applied with a felt mesh. That's just what I use. I use a decking product, which from KM Coatings. It's an exterior rated product. It withstands a lot of moisture. It's mold proof. And the neat thing is, and why I cover that transition between the foundation and the wood structure, is because that's the weakest link in the entire home for air gaps, air ventilation, and also for water penetration. Because when you have a slab on grade, it's not perfectly level. There's dips and cavities in that whole frame structure. And when you take, even though you have J-bolts coming up through that whole slab, and you put your foam sealant, your seal down, then you put your treated lumber on top of that, and you bolt that sucker down, there's still going to be gaps in there. All right. And I have found that some people use liquid nails on there and they don't use seal, but I like the foam on there because it actually helps to get a broader coverage across that entire plate. So the reason why I seal the outside of the home is because I stop air gaps by sealing up the outside of that home. I stop air gaps from getting underneath that frame structure. And that's the weakest link. And I've talked with a lot of technicians who actually do blower door tests. And they say that's one of the weakest parts of a home where air can get underneath. But if you have a flood coming on the outside and you've got I did this on a home south of me down by the river, and we went up 2 feet because they were down by the river, and I was worried. In the event of a high water table, all they have to do is sandbag the doorway on the back, and they're protected because no water is going to get inside that home. We've sealed up that transition from concrete to the wood structure. And then, of course, the frame, the doorways, that's a different story. Just grab a bunch of sandbags and seal that up, and you're going to keep it from getting inside the home. So, Gray House Studio, great name. Do you think raw land prices will go down over the coming years with interest rates so high? What do you think, honey?
Inventory is still low.
Inventory is still low in our market, or do you think across the nation?
Across the nation, there are places it is coming down.
She says there are places where it is coming down.
It's just supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of people moving here. So
we have a lot of people moving where we're living.
They're not making any more land. So
and they're not making any more land. It is a scarce commodity. So
yeah.
I think that people could be over their head in some markets, and they've got bank loans on land they got to liquidate, or they've got raw land that they've got to liquidate. And keep in mind that land is like gold, or it's like money in the bank. If you run into trouble and you have savings, what do? You go into your pocket and you borrow your savings. Land is the same way. My wife and I, we had 60 acres of absolutely gorgeous land. We were in a partnership with another partner, and we were doing just fine until he bailed on us and decided he didn't want to pay his part of the mortgage. So we struggled for a year. We eventually liquidated that. And by liquidating it, we got ourselves out of that heavy situation. But it was like having savings. The problem with land, you have to wait till it sells until you liquidate it to pay off debt. So you may run into that down the road. People may be having land that they can't afford or they can't keep. And if that's the case, then they'll liquidate it.
People are dying. You can find good deals.
Yeah, you'll find a deal. I think you'll find deals on land. Even with high interest rates, you're still going to find a deal on land. Owner finance it for lower too. If you can get so I've bought land that I owner financed, so that's a better deal too.
That's the best.
Sloan Click, what additional conduit or pipes would you rough in before pouring slab on grade? Great question. Giving yourself pathway for future added MEP, low voltage, future needed drainage, or other unknowns. I have some notes to put a checklist on electrical surge protection. I got to remember to do that. I actually started it, and it has to do with MEPs, magnetic electrical pulse, and it actually goes inside the circuit breaker. And I started this checklist. I just haven't finished it. I need to finish that. But I found a great source of scientists who actually manufactured a product you put inside your panels, and it's been approved by a lot of electrical engineering associations. But given that, write these things down. These are the conduits I typically put down. I put one in for low voltage, and that's basically for your exterior lighting on your landscaping and exterior valve systems for sprinkler systems. And that's typically a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch PVC, gray PVC, because that's electrical. And then I put, if I run my power underground, then that's typically a 3 or 4 inch conduit. And then I put in, I can tend to put in, I don't try to do water because I don't like water coming in through so much concrete. If it's a stem wall, I like it to go underneath the stem wall. And my plumber will typically come and run that real quick before I pour the footing. But you'll find a lot of plumbers will actually come in and dig right under the footing. I don't like that. However, if the soil allows for it and it's not a problem, then they can do it. But if I have weak soil, I don't like to weaken that too much. And then anywhere you think you might need power outside, keep in mind, the gas is not run under a footing. It's never run under a footing. Gas is run right up to the exterior of the home, and then you run your pipe system from inside the home, and you puncture it outside where that meter is going to go, and that's where they meet. They never go underground or under the footing. After the meter, the gas company is completely responsible for that line. Once it leaves the meter and goes inside the home, that's where you're responsible for that gas. And so again, the conduits, the other one I have is if I know that I need a drain somewhere for, if I had a flat roof, a lot of times I've seen those drains come right down through the frame structure into the foundation, and it exits somewhere else. But if that pipe is not done right and you could have a leak, you could have a problem, I make sure I have some headwater pressure test on that, make sure there's no leaks.
We have lots of questions.
Yeah, this to talk with other builders and talk with a landscape person on where's the best place to put drain pipes, and that might be, or they're great at that. Also, your rain gutter people, where would you suggest I put some drainage pipes outside my foundation or even in the foundation, and they can give you some ideas, and you can put those in at the same time. It'd be a great opportunity. Another question. Instead of metal rebar, what your thoughts on macro synthetic fibers, tough strand, which is really your fiberglass rebar? I'm a big fan of it. In fact, I want to try to use it on a build up north. It doesn't rust if you've got high water table, like in Louisiana, and you've got constant rust issues, and that water table is coming up through that concrete, and concrete absorbs water. I would highly recommend it. Talk with your engineer and ask them, hey, could I do this instead? Here's the other advantage. During an MEP, you're not going to electrify your foundation. During a solar flare, which has happened in history, it's not going to heat up that whole foundation and have a shortage in your electrical structure. The only caveat is you have to have a UFR ground, which has to be metal. But ask your engineer or ask your electrician if you can take that UFR ground and put it 8 feet away from the foundation of the home, so it's not going to come into the actual foundation. Because if you got hit with the right electrical storm, that could really do some damage on a foundation if it's not done right. In my neck of the woods, the electrical company is actually having us move our UFR grounds outside the foundation. They want it in the ground. I've seen foundations literally explode. I have, and I've heard of it because it's not confined into the dirt. It's just confined into the foundation, and it doesn't have a trajectory into the ground, which is why I believe in a UFR ground should go right into the earth. So it goes into the earth and it penetrates into the earth rather than inside a foundation. It's a great product. I think it's great. I just don't know if it has the same engineering capacity as metal. To talk with your engineer on that. I'm currently researching that for my own self. Question: prodigal son. Did I say it? Prodigal son. That's a cool name. How do you manage remote clients when it comes to consulting? Do you visit the site? If it's local, I'll visit the site. If it's not, we do some FaceTime, or I ask them to send me some video. But I do a lot of analysis from looking at the plans, the geotech report, the topography of the home, And we typically go on Google. Google has really good topo right these days, and so I can look at the topography on it. But I don't do any site visits. It'd be nice if I could, but I just can't afford the time or the cost for that. I've done GC consulting for students across the country: Florida, Tennessee, North, South Carolina, a lot of people in California, Idaho, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. So I'm very familiar with a lot of those sites. And the real advantage with the GC is just having me as a friend, just being able to text me when you're stressed, or text me, hey, I got this bid. What do I do? Like one of my students texted me about 2 weeks ago, and she got a bid for siding, and I think it was Hardy, and it was north of $68,000. It was pretty insane. I just did a home that was smaller than her home for about $20,000 less. So I advised her, don't take that. I think they're messing with your brain. And so she started looking for some other sources. And then there were stressful times during the course of the build. I don't know what to do. For example, I had a client about 2 years ago, and things were just going south. Husband lost a job. They just closed on a loan, and her husband lost her job the next day. And she called me, and she was stressed out, didn't know what to do. I says, don't tell the bank that your husband lost the home. Let's build this. And I told her that by building it, you're going to have equity north of $15,000 to $20,000 easy. This would be a job, part-time job, almost equivalent for your husband during that time. And let's build. So she went forward with it. Her husband picked up a job about 3 months into it, and she had to finish building the home, but he picked up a job as a police officer. And so it's just having that resource to talk to when really things kind of go haywire, and having someone to talk to who's been through just about everything. It's kind of a resource. Plus also looking at bids, checking things out. What do you think about this? And hey, let's talk. And when I do the GC consultant, I have 2 conference calls. One of them is we go over the plans. I talk about them. I catch things. Oh, let's not do a cricket. No more dead valleys. I just talked with a client in California, I think, and there's a huge deck that's over, and I think that client's watching now, but I think there's a huge deck over conditioned space, and I was very worried about that, which means it's not about a matter of if, but when that leak is going to happen inside the conditioned space of the home. So now we're kind of looking at the design and maybe trying to get some coverage on top of that deck to protect that conditioned space below. Having those resources and as a resource that's what I'm there for as a GC consultant. Next question, Sloan, at minimum, what should land clearing grading contractor do on first trip out to job? Clear trees, house pads, swells for drainage, drive path for power, well drill site, septic field, etc. Pretty much in that order. The hardest part is grubbing it and getting it clear, because you don't want anything smaller than your pinky. In fact, even smaller than that, maybe a woman's pinky or baby's pinky. You don't want any organic matter in that foundation. And the more trees you have, the more potential for organic matter in that foundation. And you literally have to get that out. And typically it's nice to be able to pull stumps out during a wet environment after a heavy rainstorm, because the ground is loose. And when you pull the stumps out, you're pulling out a lot of those ancillary root systems, those capillary root systems, and you're getting them out of the dirt. The worst thing is to try to pull out during hard soil when it's dry and it's compacted. You're gonna run the risk of leaving too much organic matter in there. So that's your biggest issue. And then everything after that, you don't want to have the excavator to come back too often. The minute they have the pad ready, then the concrete guy shows up, marks off where the footings are. He can trench for the footings, and then he can leave, take his equipment, go off and do another job, because that foundation crew, that concrete crew, is going to come in, put in the rebar, get it inspected, pour the concrete. Then they're going to build their forms, and then they're going to pour their slab. And once that's done, now your excavator can come back, trench for power, do some grading, bring up soil against that pad, and do that. You want to keep in mind, and this is a really interesting call I had with one of my subcontractors. I know of a client who is constantly talking with subcontractors. She's an owner builder, and ask him, can you come back and do this? Can you come back and do this? You can drive a subcontractor nuts, and you can even cause them to walk off the job site if you think they're going to come and do one thing and one thing and one thing after another. You've got to wrap things together. And an excavator wants to wrap things together. Finish grade, maybe trenching later, but you want to get all that trenching for the footing and all the pad ready at the same time, which means you have to get your concrete guy there just when he's about ready to finish so he can mark off everything. And then when they're done, they have the last compaction test. Then he can trench for footings, and then he can haul out and he can get his equipment out of there. So question, loan. Do appraisers typically give value for open lofts? Does the square foot space get counted? Yes and no. It depends on how they appraise that. For example, I built an upstairs here at another house, and the roof structure came down at roughly a 5-foot mark or a 4-foot wall. We had a pony wall, and it came down and met that pony wall. Well, the appraiser only appraised up to the 5-foot mark. So I lost a full 1 foot, a square foot linear that way. You added up 8 feet, 8 times 4, 32 feet. I lost 32 feet on appraiser because it was below that 5-foot mark. So these are things you want to watch out for on lofts, is if you cut out your headroom so much that the real total square footage above the 5 foot or even above the 6 foot mark is limited more than you think. And that's why when you do a pony wall on an attic loft situation, you really want to try to push that pony wall as high as you possibly can if you're really strapped and trying to go for a high appraisal. Can
I add?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, let's see. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh,
Yeah.
turn your thing down. Okay, so just on appraisals, so you know that the main square footage, so the main level, is going to be counted at a higher price per square foot than the basement or the loft. But any space that is air conditioned, heated and air conditioned, will be counted in the appraisal. Your garage will not be counted if it is not heated and cooled. Typically, they're not, so you have to let the appraiser know this is heated and cooled to be counted. So I hope that helps. And yeah, lofts 5 to 8 feet. I've heard some appraisers say it needs to be 8 feet, and then some will go to the 5 foot. Hope that helps.
How about, does it appraise better for master being on the main level?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter?
It
Okay.
just, the main level square footage. Sorry, let me go back.
It just counts the main level square footage. They give a heavier price amount than a basement or a loft.
Okay.
Or it doesn't have to be a loft. It could be an upstairs, a full 8 foot upstairs. That's going to get less credit, say, less price per square foot. I don't know why they do it. They do it that way. So.
Okay. And the other thing, it may not be an appraisal issue, but it is a market issue. People typically like to have the master on the main level and not on the upstairs level. And I know that's a little different thinking. If you're young couple, you think, oh, I'd go up and downstairs. But later on, if that home needs to be sold to an older couple, they're going to, oh, I wish the master was on the main level. So in all my house plans, everything I try to do, I try to push for that master on that main level.
Yeah, resale values.
Resale value is always a real plus on that.
So that you'll get a bit, that's the best thing for resale.
Okay. All right. Let's go one more question. How many more questions do
We
we have?
have lots, but.
We have lots. We'll take 1 or 2 more questions here. Bradley says, I'm excavating, paving, and concrete flatwork contractor by trade. Great. I'm creating my budget right now. Will the bank be accepting that in these trades? My budget will be solely based on materials. No, I would include your full price that you would bid someone else and utilize that as contingency in the home. And the reason for this twofold. First of all, you're getting a loan for the real cost of the home. And second of all, you want to showcase that in order to get that on your appraisal. If you're starting to cut things out of your budget, it's not going to help the appraiser. Make sure they get a realistic budget. And you don't need to use that. You're going to save that, but save it during the course of construction, not at the budgeting phase. If you try to save it at the budgeting phase, it's going to hit you hard. It's going to be a nightmare. You're not going to get the appraisal you want. You may not get the total amount of cost and budget you need. And the neat thing is you now have a sneak attack. You now have that dry powder. You've got that extra flex in there for whatever else you may need in the home. And believe me, as a builder, I have dry powder in all places in my budget. And I know where that dry powder is. And I had a really nice talk with my clients, and we were over a little bit on some paint because we had some feature walls and they were really stressed. And I go, don't worry about that, because I'm half the cost on my dumpster fees. I'm half the cost on my plumber fees. I've saved money here and there. So I approved it. We're not over budget. We're fine. Oh, okay. But that's what I'm saying, is that dry powder throughout the budget is so powerful, and being able to put that real cost in your budget is going to give you a lot of power during the course of construction. So trust me on that. You'll do well. We're running out of time here. Let's take one more question. One more question. YB, that's a great name. What do you advise if you have a disagreement with a contractor? Roof framing was not done per plan. In my opinion, requires significant rework. Framer disagrees and states that it was done per plan. You'd have to actually show them, was it a stick-built roof or was it a truss-built roof? That's the key. And the only way you're going to be able to win that argument is to actually have your engineer come out and look, hey, this was not done to the plans that he engineered. And if it's not done, then it needs to be fixed. Now, this is where I hold out $3,000 to $4,000, even more sometimes, depending on the size of the home and the amount of the bid. I hold out a chunk of change, and I don't give that to the framer until I pass inspection. And if it passed inspection, that could be another issue. But if it's not per plan according to what the engineer states, then the engineer cannot be liable for that design if it's not done per his specs. So hopefully you held some money out. If you didn't, talk with your engineer, and ask him he may charge you a fee for a site visit, or you can actually take pictures of it and send it to him. Hey, was this done per plan? If not, can you explain why? And then I can give that to my framer, and then they can come out and fix it. So anyway, I got some events I've got to be to this evening. Again, we're going to be here next week, every Thursday from 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Have your questions. I love this. This is fun. I learn a lot from you. I actually write down things I need to research, things I need to look into, and it actually helps me build the program, what more checklists I need. Now I've got a reminder on the checklist up here for surge protection for MEPs, and that's a big story. Maybe we can talk about that some other time. It's a big issue that's going to be hitting us down the road. And we've heard from our wondrous leader over there in Germany that we need to prepare for a comprehensive cyber attack. And so these are things to research, think, always being on the horizon, seeing what's coming. Anyway, this is Keith with How to Build Your Own Home. It's been fun. We'll check in with you guys next Thursday. I'm dialing out. You guys take care.